apparently on Sportskeeda you made comments about Sting recently that displeased many. Can you explain what you were replying to, what you said, and sort of clarifying everything?
Oh, please, people, lighten up a little bit. This is what I said. And some people actually validated what I said because I heard it from them. Scott Hall told me one day, now he's passed on, God bless him, but Scott was in yo man. He told me that Sting could not tell you how he got over. He got over, but through no mental effort of his own. They just told him what to do. He went out and he did it and he got over. Well, when I said that, and I may have said it wrong, I may have said that he has no idea how he got over. Well, he does have an idea, but he could not recreate the idea. I'm saying initially, he would never, I don't think he would have that idea. But when and Ric Flair, we're going to talk about Flair in a little bit too, but Ric Flair was one of the main reasons Sting got over because Flair carried him for almost a year and a half back and forth. And if you're in the ring with a general like Flair and all the heat Flair had, and you were beating him sometimes and holding your own, well, of course you're going to get over. Sting was a big, jacked up guy, and he looked good. And he just did what Flair told him to do. That's all he did. And he may have come up with a few things later on that he'd like to do. Eventually, when people pop on certain things, well, you tend to go back to it. But it was Flair carrying that whole match. And I may have told this story before because Flair also drew a ton of money. Now, this was mid-Atlantic, the Carolinas and Virginia. Mid-Atlantic, Flair also had a series of matches with Sting, we just talked about, and with Lex Luger. And they did tremendous business. Remember what I told you about coming up with these ideas? Mm-hmm. The brain trust there says, wow, man, if Flair drew all that money with Sting, and then he drew all that money with Luger, oh, yeah, well, I'm getting it. I'm getting it. Swanee is coming to me. Why not we book Sting versus Luger? It'll be gigantic. And they did that. Guess what happened? Crickets. Crickets. And the matches they sucked. Which is, if you're ever trying to book any kind of a show, don't ever book a top babyface versus a top babyface unless you got plans to turn one of them. Because who are they going to cheer for? Well, you're going to split your audience, and no matter who wins, you're going to piss the other half off that loses. But see, I guess people tried to tell them that, but they didn't see it, and they booked it. And the next thing you know, it was Flair being injected into that feud, and he got a partner. I think it was Arn. Then they did a round with Sting and Luger versus Arn and Flair. So it's but they got mad because I think they said that he didn't have, and I did say that. I'm saying that he didn't have the mental acuity in wrestling booking to put that together. And that's why you have a ring general and you have a ring follower. And I've seen some guys that are followers are really great, but they will usually go with the guy that's been there before. And Flair was a general. See, your heel dictates the pace of the match, the heat in the match. It's without a heel, guess what? You might as well close the door because you're not going to sell any tickets. And that's why good heels made good money. And that's why they moved around more, because after a year's time in one territory, they get old unless they're turned babyface. And even turning babyface, they'll still have to leave in about 3 years because, the fans, if they just keep seeing the same people over and over, they'll eventually stop buying tickets and coming because it's boring to them. Mm-hmm.
With Sting, it's funny that you mentioned Scott Hall, because Scott Hall, I believe, is credited with coming up with the Crow Sting character. But also, I've heard in interviews with Ric Flair, probably other people as well, where they've said that when they were wrestling Sting, maybe even Barry Windham said this, is that they had to tell him when to turn to the crowd and go, oh, do the howl. I'm not doing it, but do the howl for the crowd. He didn't know how to do the Sting gimmick as well as people who he was in the ring with.
Right. That's all I'm saying, is if he needs to. Well, I think he probably learned it later on after they told him. I mean, how could you not learn it? But I believe that they have to tell him to do this and have to tell him to do everything. But see, in telling him to do everything, that's the heel's job, because they were both making money off this. So, and Sting, to his credit, he appreciated it. He did. And he knew he did, but he knew he didn't know anything, to his credit. So he never tried to go out there and do anything stupid or anything out of character, because if he did, he'd get back to the dressing room, or he may get it in the ring like, what the F are you doing? Stop, whatever it is. Or they just take over on him and, get some heat on him and tell him in the process of that. But he didn't know to do a lot of things. He's not a wrestling guy, really. I don't even think he was a wrestling fan. I think he was the Warrior. I don't think they were either. They got in this gym training, and a guy saw them, and he's a wrestling trainer, and he said, "What about wrestling?" And I don't think they were really eager to get into it, but once they got into it, they still didn't know anything. That's where I met them in Memphis. They showed up in Memphis one time as the Freedom Fighters. I thought it was one of the shittiest names I'd ever heard in my life. And they knew nothing. They couldn't be heels because they didn't know what they were doing. They couldn't be baby faces because heels couldn't tell them what to do, because they didn't. After you tell them, they still didn't know what to do. I said, guys, why don't we? I changed their names to, I forgot what I changed their name to. Yeah, because the movie was out or had been out 2 years earlier, and they needed a gimmick. They kind of took that name, and it didn't get them over, but they at least took the name. But that's where I met them, and they were horrible. They were terrible, and they weren't there long. They was only they weren't in Memphis long, maybe 2 months, maybe. That was a territory wasn't doing that good. Bringing in green talent doesn't help either. They were part of the problem, so we had to move them. So we moved, I think, Sting to maybe
Bill Watts.
Atlanta.
I think Sting went to Mid-South, and Ultimate Warrior went to Dallas. That's
right. And they both got over there. Because I think in Bill Watts' territory, Eddie Gilbert was the booker. And we need to talk about him one day, because he was a great character. He's dead now. But he liked him, took him under his wing, taught him a lot. But he didn't teach him how to lead a match. But they took him as a project and got him over. And when Warrior went to Texas, I don't know who the booker was then, they took him as a kind of a project, because getting guys with that great body and the blonde hair with Sting, they were aesthetically pleasing on TV, and they got him over there. So it's funny, they went together to Memphis and then split, and then found success in every other place they went.